At 9 o'clock in the morning, the sun spills through the narrow blinds of my lawyer's office. The light feels too bright, almost cruel, like it doesn't understand what this day means. The air smells faintly of lemon polish and old paper, the scent of endings. My children sit across the mahogany table, dressed like strangers at a business meeting. My eldest son, Daniel, keeps checking his watch. My daughter Claire scrolls through her phone, and my daughter-in-law Melissa has that smirk she wears when she thinks she's already won. They're waiting for the will to be read. My husband's last words. Our life's work, reduced to a few legal paragraphs. The lawyer clears his throat softly. He's an old friend, Mr. Harris. His eyes meet mine for a moment, and I know he remembers everything. The late nights my husband and I spent discussing fairness, the quiet promises we made to each other that our children would never fight over what we built. But they are already fighting, silently, through glances and little gestures. Daniel whispers, "Let's get this over with." Melissa mutters, "Finally, we'll see if your mother remembered who actually takes care of things." I hear every word, though they think age has dulled my ears. The envelope on the table is thick, sealed, official. Beside it, a smaller red folder, unmarked, forgotten, or maybe ignored, sits waiting. My fingers twitch slightly. Page 2. The sound of paper cutting through silence feels almost sacred. Mr. Harris begins reading aloud the old will, the one my husband signed before he died. His voice echoes, "To my beloved wife Margaret, I leave full authority over our home and assets." Melissa scoffs softly. Daniel leans back, nodding like a man approving a done deal. Claire doesn't even look up. It's strange how grief fades faster for those who never carried the real weight of love. For me, my husband's absence still feels like a missing heartbeat in every room. For them, it's a calculation. As Mr. Harris continues, I glance around the office. The old clock ticks with steady arrogance, as if reminding me how long I've been quiet. I've always been the silent one, the peacekeeper, the patient mother, the one who smoothed over every argument. But silence, I've learned, isn't always kindness. Sometimes it's permission for cruelty to grow unchecked. When the reading pauses, Daniel stretches, satisfied. "So that's it," he says. "We'll handle the transfer paperwork this week." Mr. Harris hesitates. "That's not quite it." The air tightens. Melissa frowns. "What else is there?" Mr. Harris's hand rests on the red folder. "Your father's will had a postscript, an addendum your mother requested years ago." They laugh. Melissa snickers. An addendum? Probably her recipe collection. Daniel joins in, a sharp laugh that feels like glass. Claire shrugs, amused. "Oh, please, Mum. We know how these things go." Their laughter burns quietly through the room, not loud, but cruel enough to slice through years of motherhood. And for the first time, I don't flinch. I simply look at them, one by one, and smile the way my husband used to before delivering a lesson no one expected. Mr. Harris taps the folder. "Page 2, he says softly, "will be read in full once I confirm all heirs are present." Their laughter dies instantly. I can almost hear my husband's voice whisper through the silence. "You always said they'd learn the hard way." I fold my hands, steady, calm. For years I gave them everything they asked for. Time, comfort, forgiveness. Today, I give them something else. Justice. The smell of lemon polish fades, and I find myself back in another morning, 10 years ago, when this same sunlight used to dance across our kitchen floor. My husband, Richard, sat by the window reading the newspaper with his glasses low on his nose, muttering about the rising cost of coffee beans. I used to tease him for worrying about small things when he'd already built something so steady. Our business, our family, our home. Back then, laughter didn't sting. It filled the walls like music. Daniel used to visit every weekend, bringing his wife Melissa and their little boy. Claire still lived nearby, working as a teacher, humming old songs while helping me cook. We weren't perfect, but we were together. Richard would say, "Margaret, if our children grow up kind, that's all the inheritance I'll ever need to leave behind." And for a while, I believed that was enough. We had built a modest empire, not of gold, but of trust. Richard ran a small furniture business, crafting by hand, never outsourcing, always saying, "Things made with patience last longer." Our children didn't see that patience as wisdom, they saw it as delay. The first signs came quietly. The way Daniel started talking about expansion and investment, words too sharp for our gentle lives. He'd flip through property magazines at dinner, telling his father how old methods don't make money anymore. Melissa would nod beside him, adding, "You could sell the workshop land, buy condos, flip them. Why hold on to dusty wood when you can have glass towers?" Richard would chuckle softly. "Because wood holds warmth, my dear. Glass only reflects it." She'd smile politely, but her eyes would roll when she thought I wasn't looking. I should have spoken up then. But mothers often mistake silence for peace. Claire, my sweet girl, started drifting too, not out of greed, but shame. She married into a family that thought simplicity was poverty. Her husband, Andrew, came from people who spoke of love like an investment strategy. When she stopped coming for Sunday dinners, I pretended she was busy. But deep down, I knew she was embarrassed of us, of our small house, of her father's hands still stained with varnish. And yet Richard never complained. He'd say, "Children must walk their own roads, Maggie. Ours just happened to lead home again eventually." But they didn't. The day he brought up writing the will, I remember the look on his face, a mixture of practicality and quiet faith. He said, "We'll make it simple. Equal shares. No favoritism." I agreed, though a faint unease pricked at the back of my heart. It wasn't about money. It was about values, and I feared ours were no longer shared. One night I overheard Daniel telling Melissa, "Dad's too old-fashioned. Once he's gone, we'll fix everything. Sell the house, modernize it. Maybe even demolish and rebuild." Melissa laughed. "Oh, I can already see the pool. Don't worry, I'll handle your mum. She's easy to convince." I stood outside their guest room door, frozen, my hand trembling against the wall. Their voices were soft but sure, young people talking not about dreams, but about erasure. I wanted to cry, but instead I found myself whispering, "Not yet. Don't let them see you break." It was the first time I realized that the kindness I'd always practiced could one day be used against me. Richard passed away not long after. A quiet morning, like any other. He went to his workshop, said he'd polish one last chair for a customer he liked. When he didn't return by lunch, I found him slumped in his chair, his tools still in his hand, sunlight falling on his face like a final blessing. That moment still steals my breath. Because grief doesn't arrive like thunder. It comes like fog, thick, soft, and inescapable. After the funeral, people left casseroles and condolences, but my children left arguments. Daniel wanted the business papers. Melissa wanted the jewelry for safekeeping. Claire wanted silence. She didn't pick up my calls. I remember sitting in our empty dining room that night, the chairs still arranged for guests who'd already gone, and realizing that the echo in the room was my new companion. Mr. Harris came a week later, gently placing a folder on my table. "Margaret, Richard's will is straightforward. You're the executor. Everything is under your care." I nodded, but something inside me whispered, care for it well, not just for them, but from them. He hesitated before leaving. Sometimes, he said, love needs boundaries to stay love. I didn't understand then, but I would. Years later, that single sentence would become my armor, and the reason I'd write my own page. I never imagined the sound of silence could be so loud. The day after Richard's funeral, the house feels hollow, like the air has forgotten how to move. The curtains hang still, the clocks tick too clearly. Every corner echoes with a memory. His laugh at breakfast, the creak of his favourite chair, the faint scent of cedar from his workshop drifting down the hallway. I move slowly, touching things that still remember him, his tools, his glasses, the cup he left half full on the workbench. Grief is strange. It doesn't come in waves like they say. It sits on your chest and waits for you to breathe so it can take that breath from you. Daniel arrives first, not with flowers, with a briefcase. Melissa follows, heels clicking on the floor like a metronome counting down to business. Claire comes last, eyes red, clutching a single lily. She doesn't speak. They sit around the table, the same table where we once played board games and shared birthdays. Now it's paperwork and tension. Daniel clears his throat. Mum, we need to be practical. There are accounts, deeds, and the business inventory to sort out. I nod weakly. Yes, but your father just... He cuts me off. That's exactly why we should handle it quickly. You're not in the right state to manage finances. Melissa smiles. That polished kind of smile people wear when they're hiding greed behind manners. Don't worry, Mother, she says sweetly. We'll make sure everything's handled properly. Handled. That word lingers in the air like a warning. Mr. Harris arrives that evening with the will. He reads it carefully. Everything left to me as executor. A simple structure built on trust. Richard believed our children would honour that trust. But I watched Daniel's jaw tighten. Executor? Why not a joint executor? He asks. Mr. Harris explains gently. Your father wanted your mother to have full discretion. She knows the family. He's needs best. Melissa leans forward, voice dipped in honey and venom. Well, perhaps that made sense then, but she's alone now. Handling money at her age could be risky. She looks at me with mock concern. You wouldn't want someone to take advantage of you, would you? I stare at her, trying to find the daughter-in-law I once helped through childbirth, the woman I cooked for every Sunday. But she's gone, replaced by calculation. Claire finally speaks, her voice trembling. Daniel, stop. Let her grieve. He slams his hand on the table. Grieving doesn't pay property taxes, Claire. The room falls silent. That night I walk through the empty rooms whispering to Richard's photograph. You always said they'd be fine, that they'd take care of each other. His smiling face doesn't answer, but I can almost hear his voice, patient, calm. Give them time, Maggie. They'll remember who they are. But time, I've learned, doesn't always heal. Sometimes it hardens. In the weeks that follow, Daniel begins managing the business temporarily. He changes passwords, redirects accounts, insists on signing documents for my convenience. I let him, partly out of exhaustion, partly out of denial. Maybe I wanted to believe this was love, not control. Melissa starts coming by more often, pretending to check on me, but her eyes always wander to the paintings, the silver set, the jewelry box. Once she picked up my wedding ring from the nightstand and said, "This design's so vintage, you could sell it for a fortune now." I slipped it from her fingers gently. "It's worth more as memory." She laughed lightly. "Memories don't buy anything, Mother." Each visit leaves the house colder. Claire calls less. Her husband doesn't like too much involvement, she says. I tell her I understand. I always say I understand, Betsy, even when I don't. One morning, I wake up to find the workshop emptied. Every chair, every tool, gone. Daniel leaves a note on the counter. Sold the old furniture, Mum. It was rotting anyway. Used the money to pay off some family debts. Family debts. He doesn't mean his father's debts. He means his own. I sink to the floor, the room spinning. The space smells of sawdust and betrayal. It hits me then. Grief was supposed to be my hardest battle, but the war had only begun. That night, I call Mr. Harris. He listens quietly, then says, Margaret, sometimes love blinds us. But when love meets disrespect, it must open its eyes. I look around the empty room, the hollow place where Richard's laughter once lived, and I whisper back. Then it's time I open mine. There's a certain sound a house makes when it forgets it's a home. It's not loud, it's the kind of silence that hums under the floorboards, lingers in unwashed teacups, and hides inside photo frames. That's the sound I live with now. Months have passed since Richard's death. The flowers people brought have long dried up, their petals curling like paper secrets. The neighbours stopped dropping by, their voices replaced by the ticking of the old wall clock and the rustle of bills arriving in the mail. But what hurts most isn't who left, it's who comes back. Daniel visits every Sunday, not with food, not with warmth, but with documents. Just sign here, Mum, he says, dropping stacks of paper on the table like fallen leaves. He tells me it's for tax purposes. He tells me I should rest. He tells me to trust him, the same way I once told him bedtime stories about honesty. Melissa follows him around, taking quiet inventory. She counts heirlooms with her eyes, the grandfather clock, the silver trays, the antique vases Richard loved. Once she ran her fingers along the piano keys and said, "We could sell this. Nobody plays it." I told her, "Your father built this room for the sound." She laughed. "Sound doesn't pay property tax. They don't come to see me. They come to see what's left." Claire visits once in a while, always apologetic, always in a rush. Her hugs feel like questions she's afraid to ask. When I mention the tension between her brother and me, she says, "Please, Mum, don't start another fight. Just let him handle things." Let him handle things. That phrase has become the anthem of my undoing. I spend my days dusting what no one notices, the furniture, the shelves, the corners of old photographs. I talk to Richard sometimes, not to the air, to the memories that still breathe in this space. I tell him how the garden looks smaller without him, how the kitchen and light flickers now and then, how his chair still creaks at 7 p.m. as if waiting. But nights are worse. Nights are when the house sighs. I lie awake and count footsteps that aren't there. I listen for the sound of a key turning in the lock, Daniel's key, Claire's, anyone's, but no one comes. I used to think I was strong because I could keep everyone together. Now I see, I only held them long enough for them to drift farther away. One evening, Mr. Harris drops by unannounced. He still carries that same worn leather briefcase he's had since my children were in school. He sits across from me with a kind but cautious expression. "Margaret," he begins softly, "I've noticed a few transfers from the business accounts. Some documents I never approved." I nod. "Daniel's handling things. He says it's necessary." Mr. Harris leans forward. "That's the problem. You've given him power of attorney without full oversight. It could put you at risk." I feel a chill. "Risk?" He sighs. "You need protection. You need clarity in writing. Something only you control." For a moment I stare at him, not quite understanding. Then he adds, almost gently, "Perhaps it's time to update your will. The words settle between us like thunder disguised as calm. My first instinct is guilt, as if rewriting my will is betrayal. But then I remember Melissa's laughter in the living room, Daniel's impatience in my kitchen, the way they talk about my house like a future possession. I whisper, I don't want to take from them. I just want to make sure the right things go to the right hearts. He nods. That's exactly what we'll do. When he leaves, the house feels different. Not lighter, but awake. As if it knows something new is beginning. Later that night, I sit by Richard's old chair, the one Daniel almost sold. I hold his photograph against my chest. You always said fairness starts at home, I murmur. Then I add, through trembling lips, maybe justice does too. The next morning, I open the curtains wide. Dust floats in the sunlight like tiny ghosts finally seen. And for the first time in months, I make tea for two. One for me, one for the woman who's finally ready to stop being quiet. It's strange how betrayal doesn't always arrive with shouting. Sometimes it comes with laughter. It was a Saturday. I remember because the garden smelled of wet soil and I had just trimmed the roses Richard planted years ago. The air was calm, heavy with the promise of rain. Daniel and Melissa had dropped by unexpectedly, smiling too brightly, acting too kind. "Mom," Daniel said, "we brought you dinner. Melissa made pasta." Melissa smiled sweetly. "We thought you'd enjoy company." It felt practiced. But I told myself not to overthink. I wanted to believe kindness still lived in them. They set the food down, plates clattering against the old oak table. We ate. They talked, mostly to each other, about property prices, market trends, and smart flipping. I sat quietly, stirring my food, half listening, half dreaming of the way things used to be. After dinner, they offered to tidy up, insisting I rest. So I went upstairs, pretending to comply. But habit made me pause on the landing. The old habit of listening, of caring too much about every tone, every pause. Their voices floated up from the kitchen. Daniel. "The house alone is worth more than $500,000. Melissa. "Exactly. And the workshop lot? Prime space. We could sell it all, move her into assisted living. She'll be comfortable. And we'll finally have liquidity." Daniel laughed. "Mom won't even notice. She barely leaves her room these days." Melissa's tone turned colder. "Just make sure the paperwork looks clean. Once it's transferred, she can't undo it." The fork slipped from my hand. The sound, tiny, metallic, felt like thunder. I froze at the top of the stairs, gripping the banister so tightly my fingers ached. For a long moment, I couldn't breathe. All those years of patience, all the sacrifices, the sleepless nights, the birthdays planned, the dreams built, all of it reduced to liquidity. The laughter rose again, casual and cruel. Then Melissa added, "And don't worry about Claire. She won't interfere. She's too busy saving her marriage to care." Daniel replied, "Good. Let's schedule the sale next month." The words shattered something deep inside me. It wasn't just about money. It was the realization that I'd raised people who saw me not as mother, but as obstacle. I turned back toward my room, heart pounding so loudly I thought they'd hear. In that moment, I felt something unfamiliar. Not sadness, not fear. Clarity. Upstairs, I sat by the window where Richard and I used to drink tea. The rain finally began, tapping softly against the glass. Each drop felt like a truth I could no longer avoid. I whispered, "You were right, Richard. Love without limits turns into entitlement." The next morning, I called Mr. Harris. He answered on the first ring, as if he'd been expecting the call. "Margaret," he said. "I think it's time," I replied quietly. "I'm ready to write my story. Properly this time." He didn't ask questions. "I'll prepare everything. Come when you can." I went that afternoon wearing my best coat, the one Richard always said made me look formidable. The drive was short, but every mile felt like a goodbye. To the woman who tolerated everything. When I arrived, Mr. Harris greeted me with his familiar warmth. "Margaret," he said, pulling out a chair, "tell me what's on your heart." I told him everything. The laughter, the plans to sell, the emptiness. He listened in silence, eyes clouded with sorrow and respect. When I finished, he leaned forward. "Then let's begin," he said. "But let's do it wisely." He explained that we could revise the will, discreetly, and add legal layers my children wouldn't anticipate. But I hesitated. "I don't want revenge," I whispered. He nodded. "I know. You want fairness." Those words felt like oxygen. We spent hours talking, not about numbers, but about values. He asked, "Who's shown you kindness?" I thought of Grace, my caretaker who brings me soup and checks on me without reason. I thought of Samir, the old gardener who still waters Richard's roses every morning, refusing payment. I thought of the orphanage my husband used to donate to, quietly, every Christmas. By the time the sun dipped below the windowsill, we had a plan, not of anger, but of balance. Mr. Harris smiled faintly, his pen resting against the paper. "One final suggestion," he said. "We'll separate it. 2 pages. 1 public, 1 confidential. The first gives them what they expect. The second gives the truth to those who deserve it." 2 pages, I repeated, almost to myself. 2 faces of love. He nodded. "Exactly." That night I returned home to find Daniel's car still in the driveway. He was in the living room, looking through old photo albums. When I entered, he smiled. "Just reminiscing, Mum." But his eyes weren't on the photos. They were on the cabinet behind them, where I kept the property deeds. I smiled softly back, heart pounding with new strength. "Take what you want to remember," I said. "Just don't forget who gave it to you." He looked puzzled, but I didn't explain. Some lessons don't need lectures, they just need time. That night, I slept peacefully for the first time in months. Because for once, I wasn't waiting to be saved. I was preparing to save myself. The next morning, I wake before dawn. The house feels different, not because it's less empty, but because it's no longer mine to lose. The kettle whistles softly in the kitchen, steam rising like a whisper of resolve. I pour my tea and sit by the window, watching the street outside come alive. Joggers, newspaper boys, and strangers carrying on with their ordinary mornings. And for the first time in months, I feel steady. I'm not afraid of what's coming anymore. I'm preparing for it. When I arrive at Mr. Harris's office later that day, he already has everything arranged. The wooden table is cleared except for a single stack of papers, neatly bound, and a fountain pen waiting beside it. He greets me with that familiar calm, the kind people use when they know you've already made up your mind. "Margaret," he says gently, "are you sure?" I nod. "It's not revenge, Mr. Harris. It's correction." He smiles faintly. "Then let's begin." We spend hours drafting the document, line by line, condition by condition. He guides me through each clause like a surgeon handling something sacred. The first page is what everyone expects. A clean, predictable inheritance. Each child receives their share. Nothing unusual, nothing suspicious. But the second page, the confidential addendum, is where truth takes shape. We craft it together, careful and deliberate. Every paragraph begins with a condition, not of wealth, but of worth. Daniel's share remains valid only if he preserves the family home, keeps the workshop in use, and supports the community centre his father once funded. Melissa's eligibility is conditional upon showing consistent care, physical and emotional, for me while I live. And Claire's portion depends on her rekindling ties with the family, not in money, but in time spent. If they fail, if they show greed, neglect, or deceit, their inheritance transfers entirely to the sons. Those who kept the house alive: Grace, the caretaker who stayed through loneliness; Samir, the gardener who never took payment; and a small orphanage, the same one where Richard and I donated every Christmas. When I read it aloud, it feels like breathing truth into paper. This isn't punishment, it's restoration. Mr. Harris sits back, eyes glinting with something like admiration. "You've created something remarkable," he says softly. "You've turned a will into a mirror." "A mirror?" I ask. He nods. "Yes, it will show everyone exactly who they are." We add one final note, a line he insists on including. "This document shall remain sealed and confidential until the time of public reading, at which point all parties must be present for it to hold effect." I ask him what that means practically. He smiles. "It means no one gets to run. They'll all have to hear it. Every word." When we finish, I sign my name carefully, tracing each letter like a vow. For a moment, I stare at the ink glistening under the lamp. It looks alive. Mr. Harris places the 2 pages into separate envelopes, one white, one red. The red one is stamped confidential. He slides them into a folder, locks it in his cabinet, and says, "I'll safeguard this personally. Only I or my firm can release it." I nod, relieved. But before leaving, I ask, "What happens if I go before they change?" He looks at me, steady. "Then the truth speaks for you." The drive home feels lighter, almost holy. The trees sway gently along the road, and I imagine Richard walking beside me, that same calm smile on his face. "You did it, Maggie," I hear him whisper. "You finally stood your ground." That night, I sit at my writing desk and open my diary, something I hadn't touched in years. I write only one sentence. I've written love into justice, and justice into peace. The ink doesn't smudge this time. Over the next few weeks, I live differently, not louder, just clearer. When Daniel visits, I greet him with warmth, but no longer hand him papers to sign. When Melissa complains about the old house, I nod, but don't argue. And when Claire calls, I listen, but I stop pleading. They sense the change. They don't know what it means, but they feel it. Like a draft they can't trace. One afternoon, Daniel frowns as he notices a small lockbox on my desk. "What's that?" he asks. "Just old memories," I reply. He laughs softly. "You're getting secretive, Mom." I meet his gaze. "Not secretive, Daniel. Selective." He doesn't understand. He's not meant to. Not yet. Later, after they leave, I walk into the garden. Samir is trimming the hedges, humming softly. Grace stands by the porch, folding laundry with that gentle rhythm that feels like prayer. I call them over. They come, smiling, unaware of the gift that's already theirs. I don't tell them, of course, but I say, "If anything ever happens to me, just remember, kindness never goes unpaid." Grace blushes, nodding. "Don't talk like that, Mrs. Lewis." I smile. "I'm not. I'm just saying, goodness has its own bank account." As they laugh lightly, I look up at the sky, pink and gold in the evening light. It looks like peace. And for the first time in years, I feel safe. Not because I'm protected, but because I've built protection myself. It's a Sunday afternoon, the kind of soft, golden day that once meant family. But lately, even sunlight feels staged in this house. I'm arranging flowers on the dining table when I hear the gate creak. Daniel's voice echoes first, smooth and practiced. "Mum, you home?" Before I can answer, the front door opens. Melissa follows, wearing her expensive perfume, the kind that smells like pride disguised as sophistication. They never call any more before coming, they don't ask, they arrive. "Look at this place," Melissa says, stepping inside, her eyes sweeping across the room. "It's like a museum. Mum, honestly, when are you going to let us update it?" I smile faintly. Some things aren't meant to be updated. She laughs. "Oh, come on. Wallpaper from the 80s. This could be a luxury property if we modernized it. Daniel, show her that listing you saw." Daniel takes out his phone, scrolling through some photo. "See this one? Sold for 800,000, and it's smaller than this house." I say nothing. I've learned that silence can be more eloquent than argument. Melissa keeps going, her words sharp but coated in false affection. "Imagine, Mum, big windows, marble kitchen, maybe even a pool. You could have your own suite downstairs. Of course, we'd handle all the renovation." I look at her. Perfectly dressed, polished, empty. "Renovation," I repeat softly. "Or replacement." She blinks, then smirks. "Don't be dramatic." Daniel steps closer. "Mum, we're just trying to help. You can't live here alone forever. It's not safe. You'll trip on those old stairs one day." He gestures toward the staircase. The same one where he once ran up to show me his first report card, beaming with pride. "I'm fine," I say calmly. "You think you're fine," he corrects. "But we know what's best. We already found a retirement home. They have nurses, events, even a piano room. You'll love it." I turn slowly. "You've already found one?" Melissa grins. "We're just being proactive." Something inside me tightens. Not anger, not fear. Something deeper. A thread snapping. "You'd move me out of my home before I'm gone?" I ask quietly. Daniel exhales impatiently. "Mum, this is just a house. Don't be sentimental. Just a house." The words clang through me like a bell tolling for something sacred. This is where I raised them. Where Richard built furniture until his hands blistered. Where every birthday candle, every lullaby, every fight that ended in forgiveness, all of it happened inside these walls. And now it's just a house. Melissa laughs again, reaching toward the china cabinet. "These antiques, they're lovely, but no one uses them. I can call a dealer. He pays well for classic sets." Her hand brushes the porcelain plate my mother gave me on my wedding day. I step forward and take it from her gently. "Not this one," she rolls her eyes. "Fine, but the rest are just collecting dust." I look at both of them. Their faces so familiar and yet somehow unrecognizable. I realize then that I am standing inside a theatre, watching actors play my children. Daniel sighs. "Mom, why do you always make things difficult?" "Difficult?" I echo. "You mean having boundaries?" He frowns. "You're twisting things. We're trying to help." Melissa adds, "Yes, but you never appreciate it." I feel my pulse slow, not from rage, but from clarity. I finally understand what Richard meant when he said kindness must have edges or it turns into weakness. I set the porcelain plate back carefully. "Thank you for dinner the other week," I say softly, "and for the thought of helping, but I'll stay here until I can't anymore." Melissa laughs. "We'll see." Their tone changes then, impatient, slightly mocking. Daniel mutters something about stubborn old habits. Melissa pulls out her phone and starts snapping pictures. of the furniture, the paintings, the shelves. "What are you doing?" I ask. She replies lightly, "Just documenting. You know, in case we ever need appraisals for insurance." I nod slowly, saying nothing, but inside, the decision hardens. When they finally leave, I stand by the window and watch them walk down the driveway. Their laughter drifts back through the open air, bright and hollow. Grace, my caretaker, steps quietly into the room. She looks at me, concerned. "Are you all right, ma'am?" I turn to her, still watching the gate close. "Yes, Grace. I'm more than all right." She hesitates. "They upset you again, didn't they?" I smile faintly. "No, Grace. They reminded me." "Reminded you of what?" "That love must be earned." That evening I drive to Mr. Harris's office one last time. He's working late, as he often does. When he sees me at the door, he knows immediately. "Margaret," he says quietly, "is it time?" I nod. It's time to seal it. He opens the drawer, takes out the red folder, the one marked confidential. I take a deep breath and sign the final line. The sound of the pen scratching paper feels like thunder. Soft, ut, final. When it's done, Mr. Harris stands. "I'll hold this securely. No one sees it until you're gone." I nod. That's exactly how I want it. Before I leave, he says something I'll never forget. Sometimes justice wears silence like armor. As I drive home, the streetlights flicker against the windshield, streaking the glass with pale gold. The house greets me in quiet darkness. I touch the walls as I walk through each room, kitchen, hallway, workshop, whispering softly, "They won't erase you." Then I pour myself a cup of tea, steady my hands over the warm porcelain, and let the quiet return. Except this time, it isn't the sound of loneliness. It's the sound of power, waiting. It begins with exhaustion, not the kind sleep can cure, the kind that lives behind your ribs, heavy and wordless. One morning I wake and the light hurts. My hands tremble when I try to lift the kettle. The tea spills, dark and bitter, over the counter. I watch it drip onto the floor and think, so this is how the body begins to whisper goodbye. The doctor says it's just fatigue, my heart, my age, my grief catching up all at once. He tells me to rest, eat well, avoid stress. But how do you avoid stress when your very memories are heavy enough to bend your spine? Grace becomes my shadow. She brings soup, tidies the rooms, opens windows so the air can move again. She hums softly while folding clothes, her voice steady and low. Sometimes I close my eyes and pretend she's my daughter. Samir still comes by for the garden. I watch him through the window, his bent back, his patient hands, the way he touches each rose as though it were alive. He always waves at me before leaving. No words, just the kind of loyalty that doesn't need sound. Daniel stops visiting. He says work is overwhelming. Melissa sends text messages, short, clipped, polite. "Hope you're okay. Take care." I don't reply. There's nothing left to say that won't feel small. Claire calls twice, both times apologizing for being busy. Her voice trembles, but guilt without action is just another form of absence. When I hang up, I don't cry. I just sit by the window, feeling the world move on without me. At night, I dream of Richard. He's always sitting by the workshop, sanding something invisible. When I call to him, he looks up, smiles, and says, "Almost finished, Maggie." I wake before I can ask what. Days turn into weeks. My world shrinks, from rooms to corners, from corners to the bed. Grace keeps everything spotless, her care quiet but constant. Once, she holds my hand and says, "You remind me of me, your mother." I whisper, "Did she die alone too?" She squeezes my hand tighter. No, ma'am. She died loved. That night, I can't sleep. Her words keep echoing. She died loved. I think about love, how mine grew wild and generous, how it was taken for granted, how it finally learned to protect itself. Sometime around midnight, I reach for my notebook. My hands shake as I write, each word slow and deliberate. Mr. Harris, when the time comes, please bring out page 2. I seal the note and leave it on my bedside table. The act feels sacred, like lighting a candle in the dark. The next morning, Grace finds me sitting in the armchair by the window, wrapped in a shawl. She scolds me gently. You shouldn't be up this early. I smile. I wanted to watch the sunrise. She chuckles. You can see it every day. I shake my head. Not every day feels like a beginning. She doesn't understand what I mean, and that's all right. The following days, my strength fades faster. There's a quiet dignity in decline. Your body becomes softer, your words fewer, but your eyes see more clearly than ever before. Once, when Grace is gone to the market, I look around my bedroom, at the photographs, the fading wallpaper, the small things that still carry warmth. I whisper into the air, "Thank you, Richard, for letting me finish what you started." Outside, the garden blooms brighter than it has in years. Roses everywhere, red, white, yellow. Samir says the soil is finally at peace. I think he's right. The house feels peaceful too, like it's holding its breath before a revelation. One night, I feel the fever rise again. Grace sits beside me, pressing a damp cloth to my forehead. "Do you want me to call your children?" she asks softly. I look at her tired eyes, her kind face, and say, "They'll come soon enough." She nods slowly, not asking more. When she leaves to refill the basin, I whisper into the stillness, "I'm ready." The next morning, Grace finds me asleep, or so she thinks. The teacup on my nightstand is cold. The window is open. The curtains move gently in the breeze. And there, beside my folded hands, lies a sealed letter addressed to Mr. Harris. At 9 o'clock sharp, the clock on the lawyer's wall strikes once, that same hollow wooden chime I remember from months ago. The air smells of paper and lemon polish again. How strange, I think, that endings always smell the same. Daniel, Melissa, and Claire sit across the table, dressed in black as though grief were a costume. Their eyes are dry, their voices brisk. Mr. Harris stands by the window, folder in hand. And I, though my body is gone, am still here, inside the story that bears my name. I see everything. The way Daniel drums his fingers against the desk. The way Melissa's heel taps impatiently. The way Claire avoids everyone's eyes. "Let's get started," Daniel says. "We don't have all day." Mr. Harris clears his throat. "We'll proceed as your mother wished. All heirs present. Full reading recorded." He opens the folder, the white envelope first. His voice is steady as he begins. "To my beloved children, Daniel, Claire, and in-law, Melissa, I leave the estate divided equally. My home, my workshop, and all remaining business assets are to be shared under your joint supervision." Daniel nods smugly, whispering, "As expected." Melissa smiles, triumphant. Claire exhales in relief. They think it's over before it's begun. Mr. Harris continues. "The executor of this will is myself, acting in full legal capacity." Melissa interrupts. "Wait, what about secondary beneficiaries?" He closes the first folder gently. "That concludes page 1. She blinks. "Page 1? Mr. Harris lets the silence stretch until even the clock seems to hesitate. Then he reaches for the red envelope. Your mother left an addendum, a confidential document sealed under my custody. It is legally binding. She requested it be read only after the primary will, in your presence, and recorded in full. Daniel laughs. What addendum? We never heard of one. Mr. Harris looks up. You were never meant to... Until now. The room stiffens. Melissa shifts, crossing her arms. Let's hear it then. The seal breaks with a soft crack. Paper slides free. 2 pages, edges marked in her delicate handwriting. Mr. Harris adjusts his glasses. Addendum. Confidential. This page shall serve as a moral clause attached to all inheritance. Compliance with the following conditions determines the validity of the gifts described in page 1. Daniel frowns. What the hell does that mean? Mr. Harris continues, voice calm, deliberate. Each heir's inheritance is contingent upon their conduct toward me, the testator, during my final years. Evidence of neglect, exploitation, or sale of sentimental property will render the inheritance void. In such a case, all assets shall transfer to the secondary beneficiaries listed below. Melissa bursts into nervous laughter. This is absurd! But the lawyer isn't finished. Secondary beneficiaries, Grace Adams, caretaker, Samir Khan, gardener, and the St. Vincent Orphanage, for acts of loyalty, compassion, and service beyond blood obligation. Daniel shoots up from his chair. You can't be serious. Mr. Harris folds his hands. It is signed, witnessed, and notarized. Claire's lips tremble. She actually wrote that. Furthermore, Mr. Harris reads on, a sealed letter accompanies this document, to be played aloud. He presses a button on the small recorder. A click. Then her voice, my voice, fills the room. If you are hearing this, it means I'm gone. I loved you more than I loved myself. But love, when met with greed, becomes blind. So I chose to let truth speak for me. Melissa mutters, Oh my God. Daniel paces, jaw tight. Claire covers her mouth, tears forming. Daniel, you were my first pride. I hoped you'd protect, not possess. You sold your father's tools for profit. You sold his memory. You failed the promise you once made as a boy to keep this house standing. He stops pacing. That's not true. Melissa, you married into this family with grace in your name, but greed in your eyes. You valued marble over memory, luxury over legacy. She scoffs, blinking too quickly. Claire, you ran from the noise because you thought silence was safer. But silence, my dear, can wound as deeply as cruelty. I hope you learn that before life teaches it harder. Claire sobs openly now. To Grace, who held my hand when no one else did, and to Samir, who kept our garden alive, and to every child who believes love is too small a currency, I leave everything that love once built. A pause, then softer. If any of you choose repentance over resentment, I hope these roses bloom again for you someday. The recording clicks off. No one moves. The air feels thick, alive. Even the sunlight seems to dim out of respect. Daniel mutters, This can't hold in court. Mr. Harris replies quietly, It already does. He slides forward a stack of documents, photos, letters, bank statements, surveillance from the caretaker's log, all evidence of their neglect. Melissa stares, pale. She planned this. For years? Mr. Harris nods. She planned truth. Claire whispers. She knew us better than we knew ourselves. Daniel storms toward the door, slamming it open. Keep it! Keep the damn house! His voice cracks as he disappears down the hallway. Melissa follows, shouting something about lawyers. But her words sound small. Only Claire remains, weeping quietly. She turns to Mr. Harris. Where is she buried? He hesitates, then answers, By the rose garden, the one her husband built. Claire nods, trembling. Then I'll go there. Maybe she'll still listen. When they're gone, Mr. Harris looks at the empty chair across from him. He speaks softly, as if to the air. Well done, Margaret. You wrote love's last lesson perfectly. And somewhere, beyond the walls, I smile. Because justice didn't need witnesses. It just needed time. The room is still. Too still. Only the sound of the ceiling fan moves the air. Mr. Harris lays page 2 flat on the table, smoothing its corners like a sacred text. Every word on that paper is a heartbeat of mine, the last of them. Let it be read in full, he says quietly. Claire sits down again, pale and trembling. Melissa leans against the wall, arms crossed, her face hardening into disbelief. Daniel paces behind them, a storm in human form, but no one speaks. Mr. Harris begins. Clause 1. The estate known as 46 Maple Drive, my home, my husband's workshop, and all land attached, shall remain under the family's name only if the heirs preserve it in its current structure and maintain its memorial garden for a minimum of 10 years following my death. Daniel exhales sharply. 10 years? That's insane, Mr. Harris continues. Failure to comply will result in immediate forfeiture of ownership, and said property shall transfer to the listed secondary beneficiaries. Melissa's voice rises. Secondary? You mean those servants? Mr. Harris lifts his gaze. Caretaker Grace Adams, gardener Samir Khan, and the St. Vincent Orphanage. Yes. Her laugh breaks into disbelief. Unbelievable. Clause 2, he reads, states that all liquid assets, including savings and insurance claims, will be held in a trust managed by the executor. Each child will receive annual disbursements only upon documented evidence of acts of compassion, volunteer work, charitable giving, or care for family. Daniel snaps, What does that even mean? Mr. Harris answers calmly, It means your inheritance is moral currency. You earn it yearly through kindness. Clause 3. The business once owned by my husband shall not be sold, rebranded, or dismantled. Its name, Lewis Sons, shall remain, not for profit but for legacy. If neglected or misused, full ownership transfers to Samir Khan, who has maintained its foundation loyally for over 2 decades. A pause. Daniel's voice breaks. She's giving my father's workshop to the gardener. Mr. Harris corrects softly. She's giving it to the only man who treated it as sacred. Melissa slams her hand on the table. This is absurd. We'll contest it. Mr. Harris meets her eyes, unflinching. You can try. But every clause is accompanied by evidence. She anticipated this. He pulls a thin folder from his briefcase and spreads photographs across the table. Timestamps, letters, bank logs, witness statements, each one a quiet record of neglect, missed visits, withdrawn funds, the sale of family heirlooms. Melissa's voice lowers. She was spying on us. No, he says softly. She was watching you stop caring. Clause 4, he continues, stipulates that Grace Adams shall retain lifelong residence within the estate as its caretaker, rent-free, with full legal protection. Claire whispers, tears rolling down her cheeks. She loved that woman like a daughter. Clause 5. Upon my passing, a portion of all remaining savings shall be donated to the St. Vincent Orphanage in the name of my late husband, Richard Lewis. For every child there who dreams of a family, may they find one through kindness, not inheritance. Mr. Harris pauses, his voice trembling slightly. And now, the closing statement. He unfolds the last page. My final words. The room holds its breath. To my children, I forgive you, But forgiveness is not the same as forgetting. I gave you love that asked for nothing, and you returned silence that taught me everything. You made me understand that love must have form, not just feeling. So I wrote this to protect the goodness still left in our name. If you wish to reclaim your inheritance, do so not through lawyers, but through actions. Every good deed you perform will unlock what greed once locked away. Life itself will measure you, not I. Daniel, if one day you rebuild your father's workshop, not for profit but for passion, you'll understand why he refused to sell it. Only then will it truly be yours again. Melissa, if you learn that wealth without empathy is bankruptcy of the soul, you'll realize this was never punishment. It was mercy. Claire, if you find your voice again, if you stand up when it's easier to stay silent, then know, my love never left you. Grace, you taught me what it means to be cared for without condition. Samir, you kept life blooming where others only saw property. May this home be your garden now. To whoever walks through these doors in years to come, I hope you feel peace here. This house has seen greed, yes, but it has also seen forgiveness. May it remember the latter longer. A deep silence follows. No one moves. No one breathes. Claire's sobs break the stillness first. Soft, breaking, real. Daniel's head drops into his hands. Melissa stares blankly at the floor, as if trying to rewrite the story in her mind and failing. Outside, through the window, the afternoon light catches on the rose garden. Red blooms swaying gently, the wind moving through them like her whisper. Mr. Harris gathers the papers carefully, his hands trembling just slightly. He looks at them one last time. Your mother didn't take from you. She just gave to those who remembered her as more than a signature. Daniel's voice cracks. We can fix this, right? He looks to Claire. We can make donations. We can visit. Claire shakes her head slowly. She already saw who we were. We can only change who we'll be. Melissa doesn't speak. She walks out, silent, broken in a way money can't mend. Mr. Harris, Clote, says the folder, locking it in the cabinet. Her words are law now, not because they're legal, but because they're true. The camera lingers on the empty chair where she once sat. Sunlight spills across it, soft and golden. My voice returns, gentle, final. Love was the only wealth I ever wanted to share. You sold it cheap, but it still bought you one last lesson. I hope one day you learn to spend it wisely. Outside, Grace opens the front door. Samir stands beside her, keys in hand. The house sighs, not with sadness, but release. The roses sway brighter, as though touched by unseen hands. And in that light, the story closes exactly where it began. In a home full of silence that finally means peace. A week passes. The world outside my quiet house learns my name again, not as a mother, but as a headline. Widow leaves fortune to servant and gardener. Children contest will. The newspapers print it in bold, their voices loud where mine was once small. Neighbours whisper at fences, shopkeepers shake their heads, church ladies murmur prayers they never said while I was alive. Daniel avoids the reporters, his tie loosened, his pride cracked. Melissa calls lawyers who promise battles, but each clause of page 2 stands like stone. Even greed tires when faced with something so clean. Claire comes quietly, not to argue, to weep. She stands by my grave at the rose garden's edge, her tears falling on the soil that Samir still tends each morning. Grace watches from the porch, unsure whether to comfort or protect. But when Claire kneels, hands trembling, Grace steps forward and places a hand on her shoulder. No words pass between them. Forgiveness doesn't always need sound. Grace moves into the main bedroom, but keeps everything exactly as it was. My shawl folded on the chair, my photograph beside the lamp. She says she doesn't sleep well there yet. She still feels my footsteps in the hallway. Samir restores the old workshop. He cleans every tool, oils every hinge, and hangs Richard's wooden sign again. Lewis Sons, built with patience. Soon children from the orphanage arrive on weekends, learning to carve, to sand, to build things that last. The sound of hammers and laughter fills the air where argument once lived. The scent of sawdust replaces tension. Grace keeps the kitchen warm. She bakes bread the way I used to, and the aroma drifts out through open windows, calling neighbours who once crossed the street in silence. They come now with flowers, with apologies, with stories of how they always admired Mrs. Lewis. Grace only smiles and says, "She'd be glad you're here." Daniel comes back one evening at dusk. He doesn't ring the bell. He stands by the gate, staring at the house for a long time before whispering, "Dad built that fence with his own hands." Grace steps outside, wiping her palms on her apron. "Would you like to come in?" she asks gently. He shakes his head. "Not yet. I just wanted to see the lights on." Then he leaves, quieter than he arrived. Melissa never returns, but the lawyers stop calling. Maybe even pride needs rest. Claire visits every Sunday. She brings groceries, sometimes paints the garden fence with Samir, sometimes sits with Grace over tea. When she laughs, a soft, genuine laugh, it sounds like something blooming after winter. One afternoon she finds a small note tucked in the folds of my shawl. The handwriting is mine. "If you ever find your way back here, know that forgiveness is already home." She presses it to her chest and whispers, "I'm sorry, Mum." Months pass. The town council places a plaque at the gate. The Lewis Home of Legacy and Love, established 1932, donated to community service by the will of Margaret Lewis. Reporters come again, but this time they write a different story. A mother's last lesson restores faith in kindness. Mr. Harris attends the unveiling, older now, eyes wet with quiet pride. He reads aloud a final entry he discovered in my diary. "If one soul feels safer to grow old in their own home because of me, then I have lived twice." The crowd falls silent. Even the wind seems to pause to listen. Afterward, Grace and Samir open the garden gates every month for visitors. Children from the orphanage run among the roses, their laughter echoing through the halls. Claire teaches them how to bake cookies in the kitchen that once heard only arguments. The house lives again, not as inheritance, but as sanctuary. At sunset, Grace walks to my grave each evening. She waters the roses, lays a single candle, and whispers, "You were right. Goodness keeps its promises." Samir joins her sometimes, wiping soil from his hands, smiling toward the sky. The camera rises slowly, revealing the garden in full bloom, red, white, yellow, every color of forgiveness. My voice drifts through the wind one final time. Justice was never about punishment. It was about peace finding its way home. At sunset, Grace walks to my grave each evening. She waters the roses, lays a single candle, and whispers, "You were right. Goodness keeps its promises." Samir joins her sometimes, wiping soil from his hands, smiling toward the sky. The camera rises slowly, revealing the garden in full bloom, red, white, yellow, every color of forgiveness. My voice drifts through the wind one final time. Justice was never about punishment. It was about peace finding its way home. At dusk, when the house grows quiet, Grace lights a single candle in the window. She says it's for me, but really it's for anyone lost enough to need direction. From above, I watch the flame tremble and steady itself again and again, and I think, that's what love is. A flicker that refuses to die. People often say justice is loud, courtrooms, verdicts, punishment. But I know now, real justice is gentle. It arrives in silence, through small hands, tending flowers planted by a forgotten woman. It whispers instead of shouts. It rebuilds instead of ruins. It forgives instead of forgetting. And if you listen closely, you can still hear it here. The creak of Richard's chair, the hum of Grace's song, the scrape of Samir's shovel, and the heartbeat of a house that refused to be sold. Love was never meant to be divided, it was meant to be multiplied. That's the last line written in my diary. Grace framed it above the mantel. Children trace it with their fingers when they visit. Maybe that's how memory survives, not in grand gestures, but in the touch of those who finally understand. As the camera pulls away, the garden glows under evening light. Roses sway in slow rhythm, petals fall like blessings on the soil. My voice fades, softer with every breath. To anyone who listens, guard your kindness even when it hurts. Don't let silence be mistaken for weakness. And if life ever laughs at your goodness, let time turn that laughter into applause. The candle in the window flickers once, then steadies. Music rises, low strings, a single piano note, the sound of wind through leaves. And over it, my final whisper. Justice was never my revenge. It was my peace finally returning home. They laughed when I was quiet. They mistook my silence for surrender. But silence, my dear, is just love taking a deep breath before it speaks its truth. If this story found you tonight, maybe it's because you've been quiet too long, holding pain that no one noticed, giving more than you ever received. I want you to remember this. Kindness is not weakness. Forgiveness is not permission. And justice does not always arrive with noise. Sometimes it comes softly, years later, in the form of peace. When people value money over memory, let them. Your worth was never measured in things you could leave behind. It's written in the hearts you've touched, the good you've done, the calm you've created. If this story touched you, give it a like. Share it with someone who needs to believe that goodness still wins, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. Because every story like this keeps another quiet heart alive. Until next time, take care of your peace, and never stop choosing love.